Letters were a lifeline for soldiers who longed to hear news from home and to know that they were loved and missed. Letters were treasured too by those back home. A note from a loved one would be passed among families and friends, and some were published in local newspapers. These letters form one of the most authentic and honest accounts of life during war. Receiving mail from home is regarded as the greatest morale booster during warfare. I get letters and they do cheer me up. You really cannot understand what happiness the receipt of letters does afford me. When word is passed around that a mail has arrived, the whole camp buzzes with suppressed excitement. Friends and families mobilise to support the men who had volunteered for service by knitting socks and vests, baking treats, and committees raised funds. But perhaps most importantly, people wrote letters. Clarendon had its own dedicated group of volunteers, their Helping Hand League. A letter-writing committee was organised to see that soldiers from this district who had no relatives received a letter by every mail. The late arrival of mail was the second most common complaint after the poor quality of food. It would take on average 2 months for mail sent from Australia to arrive at Gallipoli. However, long delays were common. Clarendon sailor Merton Loud waited 27 months to receive a letter. The loss of letters from home was felt almost as keenly as the death of a comrade. I don't know what the authorities are doing with our letters. There must be tens of thousands of them somewhere. If we do not get a mail very shortly, I am afraid there will be a lot of bad feeling among the men. At one stage during the Vietnam War, postmen in Australia were refusing to deliver mail sent home by servicemen. Diggers reacted to the news with an equally controversial catchphrase: "Punch a postie on RTA." Another cause of mail delay was censorship. Censorship was seen as necessary to prevent military information falling into enemy hands. Any information that was seen to be compromising, such as details of military locations, was deleted. Soldiers were conscious of the fact that their mail was being censored. Some couples developed codes so that they could convey more intimate news, whilst others just censored themselves. Well, there is nothing much more I can tell you, unless I break the censor's rules and regulations. Soldiers were pressured to keep their letters cheerful, and censors would often get them to cut out any material that was not positive. Some of the letters I censor describe the shelling and miseries, and I get the men to cut this out, as it only adds needlessly to the anxieties and worries of their folk at home and is beastly selfish. They have enough to bear without reading horrors. A letter that the soldiers dreaded to write was to the families of fallen comrades. Many soldiers felt that it was their duty to let the families know how their loved ones had met their end. Thomas Davies waited several months before he could bring himself to write his accounts of his cobber, Fred Ball. I have been going to write to you on 2 or 3 occasions, but it is just as sad for me to write this letter as it is for you to read it. It is very sad, as no one will miss him more than myself, as he was a mate and a friend to me, and well liked throughout the battalion. Possibly the most tragic of wartime letters were the ones marked bluntly, undeliverable, return to sender, deceased. The return to sender mail often arrived months after a soldier's death, and families and loved ones would have to relive the tragedy of their loss all over again. The Clarendon Museum has acquired many personal messages and letters sent in wartime. One of our most treasured exhibits are a series of letters sent from able seaman Merton Loud during World War II. Merton's candid accounts of his time in service reveal his larrikin personality. "I am as good as can be expected, except for a few pimples. Yesterday we had a Yank band on board, and according to the lads, they put on a bit of a show. I didn't see it as I was on duty, and anyway, I see enough of the Yanks in fights ashore, let alone on board. The beer is waiting to be consumed, so a lad just told me, so I will say cheerio. Examples of Indigenous Anzac letters are rare, possibly due to the minimal education afforded to Aboriginal people at the time. The letters that did make it home provide an insightful perspective into the unfolding story of Aboriginal war service. Samuel Browning describes his cravings for a uniquely Australian delicacy. I am longing for a good feed of oysters and pippies. I give 10 bob for a feed. Francis Bertie Firth from northern New South Wales wrote to his mother complaining of the freezing European winters. It is about time the winter was over. I would not like to be here for another. The coldest place on earth. The humorous nature of the Anzacs is evident in many letters. If possible, send books and plenty of chocolate. Best love to all, Bert. Some gent took a pot shot at me yesterday, but it must have been a bloody awful shot. Many soldiers had to confront the disappointment at being jilted. I got a letter from Peggy the other day. She is engaged to someone else. Good luck to her. The sadness and despair of the war was a common theme. Fritz continues his blind and indiscriminate shelling and is making life hardly worth living. Just a few more lines to let you know how I've been getting on of late. Well, to tell you the dinkum truth, we've been having a rotten time of it. Soldiers also reflected on the futility of war and how we seem doomed to relive it. After 6 years of war, it is very depressing to find there are still a lot of people willing to start another one. Exposed to the brutality of war, many diggers express their longing for peace. But why should men have to take one another's lives? Were peace declared tomorrow, our men would rush over to the Turks, shake hands with them, and give them even their last cigarette. The undeniable Anzac spirit is immortalised in the personal and uncensored letters sent to and from the battlefield. They provide honest, first-hand accounts to what truly happens in times of war.